Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final final webinar, the final event of the formal Climate Sunday initiative. I'm Andy Atkins. I've chaired the initiative with a wonderful steering group drawn from many denominations and Christian charities that have helped put this together. I'm also Chief Executive of A Rocha UK. I want to say it's the ending of the formal campaign because we strongly expect that many churches will want to continue holding Climate Sundays, and that's fantastic. It was always our intention that this would not just be inspiring action in this last year, the year of COP26, but would inspire churches to keep going, because it's vital we all keep going on addressing this crisis of climate change. So we'll say later how you can do that. We're strongly expecting and encouraging churches to keep taking action, but it's the end of the formal campaign that we put together as a coalition. Tonight, we will be celebrating what we've done together. We will also be looking, most importantly, to what we do next. And in between, we will have three sessions, which will be hosted by different members of the steering group that I will introduce as we go. And they will focus on the three areas that we encourage churches to take action. We've heard about Climate Sunday, but of course we weren't just asking churches to hold a service. We know that more than 2,200 churches at least have held a service because they registered it on the website. We actually believe there are several hundred more who held a service but didn't register it for whatever reason. But we weren't just asking churches to hold a service, were we? You know that. We were saying, please worship, pray, understand the theology and the science together as a congregation, then commit to taking ongoing action, not just this year, but for years to come, until we have turned around this existential crisis. And we also asked churches to speak up, to use their voice, to campaign for governments and others to do what they can do and what they have a much bigger responsibility and power to do in the years ahead. So we will have three sessions on those three areas with invited guests on each. We're going to have to be very crisp, very concise. A bit of a warning there to my colleagues, please, and guests. There will be a chance to ask questions. Can I ask you, please, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A button. You will see a chat button. Please ignore the chat button. It will be much easier for us technologically if you can put your questions into the Q&A button, okay? Now, we will not be able to answer them all with the time here, but what that will allow is for the hosts of the three main sessions to pick out questions if there's any time at the end of those presentations, to try to offer them to the guests in their particular section to get answers from. We may also be able to address some of them in writing as we go. It just depends on how many there are and what else is going on in the session. But so please use the Q&A session button for your questions. One thing though, before we move into the sessions, I do want to thank you all very much for what you have been doing and no doubt will continue to do. Many of us here will have been working on the environment within the Christian sphere, within our churches, sometimes for many years, sometimes only recently. But I think we will all know how lonely it can be, or it has been for a while, working on these issues in some churches. Thank goodness it is getting less lonely. There is an awakening within the churches of how we must, as part of our core mission, care for God's creation. But I know that it can be very, very lonely. I only hope that for some of you, Climate Sunday has made it less lonely, that you have found other people in your church or in neighboring churches or online who really care about this, who get it the way you do. That was part of our purpose, is to bring together people who do get it, but also to bring other people who perhaps haven't been involved so much before into the equation, to help them get going for the sake of their church, for the sake of the church, for the sake of people, for the sake of all of God's creation. So I hope this makes it less lonely in the future for those who have felt that way. I also want to thank the steering group. I know that all but one of the people who has participated in this have other day jobs. This was something we were all doing over and above our day jobs. And I know just what a phenomenal effort that steering group has put in. There was one person I particularly want to thank, because I can't thank everybody, and he was the one person who perhaps was almost working full-time, and that was James Anthony. James was our consultant project coordinator. Very, very sadly, he had a serious car accident about halfway through the campaign and had to drop out in order to be able to recover. I'm delighted to say he has almost recovered. And I believe, James, you are on this call. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for your intervention right at the beginning, which was absolutely critical to get us going. And I'm glad you're almost recovered. I also want to thank Jean Leston. So Jean was the person on the board of Operation Noah who brought the kernel of the idea of what was to become Climate Sunday to the Environmental Issues Network of CTBI. And it was there that we discussed it and thought about, could we do this together, and decided, yes, we could do this together. And it was Operation Noah that put up the seed money that enabled us to get going. Without Jean and without Operation Noah, we would not have been able to do this. So I think James and Jean, early innovators and contributors to this, deserve a very special mention. But I know that all of the steering committee have worked unbelievably hard to get us where we are. So thank you very, very much to all of you. We will have a very big party. No, it won't be a work party. It'll be a work meeting. It won't be a party as soon as we can. Now, with that, I will just hand over as soon as I can to, I think, just looking at my notes, Caroline Pomeroy from Climate Stewards, who is going to take us through the first session, which is really about worship, with many special guests, I believe. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, Andy, and good evening, everybody. It's great to be with you this evening. I've been asked to just spend a few minutes thinking about the first of the Climate Sunday themes or actions, which is the worship section. So in order to do that, I got in touch with a number of churches which have held Climate Sundays over the last year. And we did some little recordings with them of their stories of what it felt like to them to do a Climate Sunday, what they learned, what they did, what resources they used, and particularly what's changed as a result, what they're going to do next. So I would just invite you now to watch this short video. This is 4 different churches from around the nations. And then after that, I'm going to have a conversation with David Blackmore of St Mary's Wendover in Oxfordshire about his church, what they've been doing, and particularly what they're going to be doing going forwards. And I hope that some of these will inspire you to reflect on what you've done already and to think about how to take it forwards this year and in the coming years. So Hannah, I think, is going to press go on the video.
Yeah, we are St John's Methodists in Settle, which is in the Yorkshire Dales, and we have a congregation of about 30 to 40 people each Sunday. Last September, the first Sunday of September, we had our Climate Sunday service here. We presented as an eco group a scientific perspective, then a perspective, because we're a rural church, a farmer's perspective, and then our treasurer took us through all the things that we did to reduce our carbon footprint when we built our new church, which was in 2015. But for a visible sign of what we're doing, we asked them to take each Sunday an e-commit slip. And on the back of it, they then write down during the course of the week something that they've done. It might be something big, they may change their energy supplier, or something small, they may put their ground coffee on the roses or something like that, or take a book to the recycling centre at the charity shop. And they write on the back of their eco slip and put their e-commit slip in our e-commit pot, which hopefully in the 12 months after that service will fill up and showing our a visible sign of our commitment.
We did this at our service, and then we were able to do it at 2 other churches in the circuit. And we hope that we can do it at three more churches next in the coming year. We've just recently, this very morning, started a Bible study group which is going to last for 6 sessions, and we're using Ruth Valeria's book, Say Yes to Life. So today...
On Sunday the 5th of September, along with churches throughout the whole country, the cathedral held a special service for climate change. It was evensong, and we had special music and special prayers, and our guest speaker was the Bishop of Buckingham, the Right Reverend Alan Wilson, and he outlined the stark reality of climate change and then talked about Isaiah's vision of a new world where absolutely everything was in perfect harmony. This service was followed by a discussion with a panel of speakers. We had Adrian Tate from Summit Action Climate Change Network, Shelley Easton from Somerset Wildlife Trust, a sixth former, Zoe Meredith from Wells Cathedral School, and David Maggs from the diocese. The discussion proved to be much more positive than I'd expected, because it emphasised what is being done and also what could be done. But for the cathedral, I think, the greatest challenge of all came from Shelley Easton. And she reminded us that the Christian Church worldwide is an enormous organisation. And as such, it should play an enormous part. It should be the most powerful force for change in the world. So there's a challenge for all of us for the future. Thank you.
Here at Newton Breda Presbyterian Church, the congregation are well used to services with an environmental flavour. A suburban church on the edge of Belfast, we've used Eco-Congregation Ireland resources for many years to structure our work on recycling, energy saving and use of the church grounds. We received an Eco-Congregation Award in 2018. We decided to mark Climate Sunday towards the end of June to avoid the summer holidays, though of course not many people were travelling in 2021. We used the Climate Sunday resources as a starting point, making use of an introductory prayer, a suggested reading from the Psalms, and the closing prayer from Reverend David Douglas of A Rocha. Our minister took the psalm as a text for her sermon, drawing together the different threads of the service. We aim to flag up the coming COP26 conference, but also to recommit the congregation to a definite action. This took the form of practical volunteering support for a new community garden being set up in the grounds of a neighbouring Methodist church.
Well, I'm representing Beulah United Reformed Church in Cardiff, and at the time that we held our Climate Sunday service, we were worshipping on Zoom as a pastorate, which is consists of 8 URCs in Cardiff and Penarth. We went on the Climate Sunday website and followed the links and got the Jubilee for the Earth resources, which we found very useful, and it was great to have a theme to work around, and also gave us a sort of structure for the service and a way of thinking and approaching it. Brilliant. I think in general it just added to quite a sort of lively interest in the environment, I would say, across the pastorate, particularly in maybe 2 or 3 churches who had already planned events which were sort of put on hold because of COVID. But I would say that it certainly helped to sort of keep the environment in people's minds, particularly ahead of COP26. Well, this year we're hoping to introduce 360 carbon in Beulah. This is now, rather than across the pastorate, so that we can audit our energy consumption and our carbon footprint. And so I think we probably will hold another service similar to Climate Sunday, and maybe include in it some actual practices that we'll try and sort of undertake. So, you know, originally we sort of committed and to take action and to sign the Time Is Now declaration. So now hopefully we can actually make good on some of our commitments.
Thank you to all those people who took part in that series of videos. I hope that's given you a little bit of inspiration and some ideas about what you might do in your church going forwards. Just to say at this point that and this will probably come up again, the Climate Sunday website is not going away. It's going to stay there, and there are some fantastic resources on that for you to help run a service around on the theme of climate. So I wanted now to bring in David Blackmore, who is a member of St Mary's, Wendover in Oxfordshire. David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Hooray. Hi, David. Nice to see you face to face. And I know that your church did a Climate Sunday last year, but first of all, could you just tell us a bit, just give us a quick picture of what your church like, give us a flavour of it.
Yes, St Mary's is a sort of medium-sized, middle-of-the-road church just on the outskirts of Wendover, which is a small town of about 9,000 inhabitants, located just in the lee of the Chiltern Hills. And I'm a licensed lay minister and a volunteer speaker for Christian Aid.
Brilliant. Okay. And in terms of your church building, is it an ancient building or a modern one? Or?
Yes, it is a medieval church, but it benefited from a restoration about 10 years ago. So we're in a good position with underfloor heating to be able to move forward. And we do hope that we will be able to get either a ground source heat pump or maybe some solar panels in the near future.
Great. Okay. So tell us about what you did last year, 2021, for a Climate Sunday.
Well, just after Easter, as a church, we signed up to the church initiative, Make COP26 Count. And I think challenged and inspired by that, we decided to have 4 special climate or care for creation themed services in the run-up to the COP26. We kicked off during lockdown with one online service where our guest speaker was Brother Hugh from Hillfield Friary, one of the first religious organisations to get a Gold Eco Church Award. And so he told us about their experiences and their journey to gold, which was a really good starting point. Then later on in July, we had a special Climate Sunday service with a pre-recorded message of welcome from Bishop Olivia and a guest speaker, Jess Hall from Christian Aid. And we had some guided nature walks in our churchyard and surrounding area, organised by the local Wildlife Trust. And in the evening, we had a special screening of the film, which had been promoted by Christian Aid, Thank You for the Rain. So that was a great event. Then in September, in Great Big Green Week, we had another service with a guest speaker, the daughter of our vicar, Sarah Mooring, who's part of the Young Christian Climate Network and had taken part in the pilgrimage from the G7 to COP26. So she talked to us about that. We also hosted an exhibition of textile panels from the Loving Earth project, which were really, really good. And then we ended up during COP26 itself with a special service that was organised and led by our children and young people.
Wow, not one Climate Sunday, but 4.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Just in a couple of minutes, could you tell us what you're planning to do this year to continue that momentum?
Yeah, well, we're really excited to have just recently got a bronze award, and so we will be celebrating that. We sort of kicked off the new year with the theme being New Year's resolutions, and we're encouraging members of our congregation to pick up on that and to make lifestyle choices like walking and cycling to church and buying local produce that is fairly traded and organic and so on. And if they can, switching their bank accounts and savings to ethical institutions. And then moving on from that, we hope to have another special service in September, again during Creation Tide or Great Big Green Week with a guest speaker. Maybe from Tear Fund. Last year we were sort of featuring Christian Aid.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's an amazing, I mean, that's very inspiring, and I hope other people have found that an inspiring selection of things that people might want to do in their own churches. Just to say, I've just been watching the Q&A coming in. One of the questions was about are there any more resources on the website? And as I said earlier, the website will stay live. A particular question was around modern all-age services rather than the sort of more liturgical ones. I know that some churches have done that kind of thing. David, did you do any of those? It sounds like your final one particularly.
Yeah, the final one was of that sort, and it was great because it was sort of bringing in contributions from all ages, literally. And I think getting the children and young people deeply involved is just so important because it's their future.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. Well, thank you for that. I think we're out of time, so I'm going to hand back to Andy for the next section of this webinar. Thank you, David.
And I will just reappear, given half a chance. Thanks, Caroline. Thanks so much for that. And guests, that's very, very helpful. Now I would like to turn to the Reverend Andrew Orr from Northern Ireland. Andrew is Eco Congregation Ireland and has served also on the steering committee. Andrew's going to take us through that whole area of commitment. What churches have committed to? What does that look like? Where does that go next? Andrew, over to you.
Thanks very much, Andy. It's lovely to see people here tonight, and lovely to hear such an interesting selection of stories from different churches across the country. A lot of people have a question when they first get involved with Climate Sunday. Maybe they've held a Climate Sunday service and they say, what do we do now? What can we do practically as a church? The great news is, of course, that no matter where you are across the four nations of the UK, there are groups, there's particular groups that will really help you with answering that question of where do we start and where do we go now? And they're the three greening schemes of Eco Church, England and Wales, Eco Congregation Scotland, and Eco Congregation Ireland, which works across the whole island of Ireland, north and south. So it's great that those organisations are there to support you and help you in that, and they all have slightly different award schemes which you can work towards and build up as congregations across the country to really support you on your journey. So we're going to hear from three churches who've been working in this area for some years now, and about what they've done and what support they've got from the different greening schemes, and maybe what they're going to think about doing in the future. So the first of those tonight we're going to hear from is Allison Clark from St Paul's Church in Clapham in London. So over to you, Allison, to tell us a bit about what you've been doing.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to start by just giving you a quick overview of our eco journey so far. We started an Eco Church Action Group and joined the A Rocha scheme in 2019. We achieved Bronze Award in the spring of 2020, and we're thrilled that in the summer of 2021, we made Silver. So now we're going for Gold, but of course it's more difficult as there are fewer boxes left to tick in each category, and those are of course the harder ones. So for us, the importance of being an eco church is to be an example in our community and also offer help and assistance to those wanting to live more sustainably. So why are we as churches well placed to do this? A church has an unusually diverse reach into the community. Using St. Paul's Clapham as an example to show this, we are a relatively small parish church with 115 adults on our electoral roll. However, we have 320 people who receive our weekly newsletter and our monthly eco bulletin. We have non-parishioners who come into the church and the community hall for concerts, art classes, Girl Guide meetings, birthday parties, and the like. And we have a churchyard where neighbors come for exercise and relaxation. We also host annual events that bring in the wider community, including one event that we sell 800 tickets to. And I'm sure most churches have a similar scenario in their parishes. So with these kind of numbers in mind, I'd like to talk about how events can provide a good eco outreach opportunity. We've discovered that there's two ways to do this, either by revamping your existing events or by creating new ones. And again, to give you two examples from St. Paul's Clapham. The first was our annual summer fair. We rebranded last year's fete as the Eco Summer Fair. And we had all the classic stalls that everyone loves, the cake stall, secondhand book stall, etc. But we also had new attractions such as Dr. Bike, which is someone we hired for a few hours to do simple bike checks and repairs. We had more vegan and vegetarian food options and old-fashioned games for kids instead of a bouncy castle. We also made sure all of our cups, plates, cutlery were compostable. And then we had lots of labeled bins for people to separate their waste into recycling, compost, food waste, and landfill. And to make a point, we had very small bins for landfill and signs saying that we hoped there would be nothing there. And in the end, we sent very little to landfill, which just really felt so great. This was honestly the first time that we were really conscious about our event waste. After the event, we sent all the compostable items to a commercial facility where they can be broken down into with high heat, since things like bioplastic cups actually don't break down into traditional compost heaps like those we have in the churchyard. And we wanted to not just buy the composting items and be done with that, but we also wanted to make sure that we actually got them disposed of properly. And something that we learned and adapted for later events was that this requires having signs with pictures, because people were quite confused at where to put some items when they had something in their hand that looked like a traditional plastic cup. So the second example came about when one of our eco-church members was keen to have a community family event that was free to all. So in September, after our Climate Sunday Eucharist, we held our first annual Big Green Day, which happened to fall during the Great Big Green Week, which many of you may know about. We wanted this to be an event celebrating things that were happening locally and invited local green charities to speak, such as a local solar initiative, our local Friends of the Earth group, and some local beekeepers who maintain hives on our church grounds. We had workshops for people to make tote bags out of t-shirts. We had a mend and repair stall for people to learn how to fix their clothes, and a composting workshop. We invited local schools to take part in a Key Stage 2 recycling art project. And we had a bring and share lunch that really brought the community together. There was a popular seed swap held in our community garden, and the entire event was held outdoors, including the Eucharist. The event had a warm and welcoming atmosphere that really, we received a lot of positive feedback from it. And it was just wonderful to be able to offer the community something that was completely free and where they could also learn some skills. We've already started planning our second Big Green Day this coming September, again, during the Great Big Green Week. And if you don't know about that initiative, that's a national event, please go online, look it up, and you can register your own event regardless of the size. And we just like to encourage everyone to have a big vision, but do start small to not get overwhelmed, and it will evolve and grow as organically as it has for us. So thank you.
That's super, Allison. Thank you very much. Some really interesting, inspiring ideas there. I think it's fantastic to hear so much going on. Our next speaker from a different part of the UK, I have with us Fiona Gannon. She's from Chamberlain, hope my pronunciation's all right there, which is just outside Swansea. Fiona, over to you.
Hello. I should say Noswaith Dda, because we are a Welsh-speaking congregation in Chamberlain. We're in Clydach, which is quite a large village just outside Swansea. So we're sort of on the border with an urban rural area. We've been committed to environmental issues for many years. And our commitment, well, I suppose takes various forms. Firstly, we want to raise awareness, not just amongst the church members, but in the local community. We want to educate and campaign. We have some members who've been very active campaigners, again, for many years, basically so that we can all become better stewards of creation. We encourage the individual church members. We have done Climate Sunday, but we do tend to include climate issues in many of our services. It's something that comes up regularly. We also have a more modern style of service, which has had to stop to a certain extent because of COVID, but which is more of a discussion group. And that is often centered around environmental issues. So we encourage individual members of the church basically to do things such as being satisfied with enough and rejecting the greed, which is such a part of our modern society. people are encouraged to want more of everything all the time. So it's changing the mindset, learning to be disciplined, learning to be unselfish, and learning always about the knock-on effects of if we are too grasping what effect that has on other populations across the world. So very actively, we're trying to acknowledge behaviour that causes harm, alongside working then to reduce and reverse damage caused to the environment. Now, church level, obviously there is some good practice that we've tried to put in place. And one of those was that for the last 5 years now, we've switched to a clean energy supplier, namely Good Energy, who've been working in this field since the 1990s. So they're one of the front runners in that sense, producing electricity obviously from sun, wind and water, biomethane as well, and all kinds of renewable energies basically. There was a little bit of skepticism among the congregation as to whether this would be effective, but I'm pleased to report that nobody has complained that the church is cold, and that it obviously there's been a completely seamless transfer to a new energy supplier. And alongside that, we have a problem, of course, like many churches in Wales. It's a very old building. It has many challenges when it comes to trying to make it environmentally friendly. It was built in 1901. Insulation is a constant challenge. We are looking to have a new boiler in the foreseeable future, and so that's our main research at the moment, is the most environmentally friendly boiler that we can acquire. Alongside the church, we have a church hall. This used to be a rather drafty vestry, but in the last 10 years that has been completely refurbished. It's now got modern underfloor heating, again obviously with the new renewable energy supplier, and it's wonderfully warm and cozy, and we use it quite a lot, particularly in the winter, to save having to heat then the less environmentally friendly chapel. People have been quite responsive to that and been aware of the reason for doing that. The other thing that we've tried to use extensively in Chamberlain is our church grounds. We've been planting wildflowers to alleviate the bee crisis for quite some time, because, well, as many people have already said by now, the lack of pollinators and so on it's in effect a countdown to catastrophe. And another great initiative which we have at the moment, alongside the chapel, between the chapel and the hall, we have a large plot of greenland, which used to be a cemetery. It's now given over to grass, but we can see there's much more potential to that site. It's a way, firstly, of opening our facilities up to the community. At the moment, we've got a wall, a dividing wall. We would ideally like to get rid of that. And we would like to plant some trees and make it, well, if you like, a haven for wildlife, but also a haven for the community, so that we can be welcoming and spread the word, really, that we can get that message out there even more than we're already doing. Like other churches we've heard from already, we registered as an eco church with A Rocha back in 2018. As I've mentioned, we've got some challenges as regards our buildings, but we are working and almost, I think, at the bronze level now. And we're very aware that it's a work in progress. We're always hoping to improve and to gain more ground environmentally. Our most recent development as well is to establish a new green group. We took part in one of the COP26 protests in Swansea city centre and spoke there, again, to raise awareness of the work we're doing and the need for action. And we've now established a new green group within the chapel so that we can continue with our work. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, Fiona. Some ideas. I really like that idea of the discussion group, encouraging congregation members to be satisfied with enough I think that's a really great, inspiring idea. I think that all of us can really put into practice, because it's not just about the church itself, but it's about the church members and what they can do in their own lives. Thirdly, we're going to go north and hear from Judith MacLeod from Scotland, and what they're doing to support congregations right across Scotland. So over to you, Judith. She here is there.
Hi, thank you. I'm a programme coordinator for Eco Congregation Scotland, one of two, and we have about 500, well, over 500 members church members who've now committed to caring for the environment. So it's 500 congregations right across the length and breadth of Scotland. And what our congregations can expect from us is support from the Eco Congregation staff. We look to support them on all stages of their environment journeys. We have a chaplaincy. Our chaplain will go out and visit congregations, and actually has been doing virtual visits during the pandemic because we've had that being unable to meet in church buildings. So he's put together videos and sent those out to churches and joined with them that way. In normal times, our team members will go out and visit the congregations and help to support them around net zero commitments. And really looking at the buildings that they've got, like the other churches that have been talking tonight, there are issues around the kind of church buildings. There's some elderly church buildings that need a different kind of care when you're thinking about net zero. And our work is very much around supporting our congregations with that. We would also like to support our congregations in their way of kind of finding greener living and support them by putting on events for them. We've had a programme of online events which are free to people to come along to, but we would also support them with running particular events for particular congregations in their own buildings. We have a number of resources on our website which are free to use for our members as well. And we would look at making the links between our organisation and other organisations who are working in the environment sort of place. We run an awards scheme, very similar to the other organisations, Eco Church and so on. Our one is quite similar to the schools environment project as well, which allows schools to get awards at 3 different levels. So our congregations are at various stages in working for their awards. We've got quite a number of Gold Award congregations across Scotland now. And we encourage our congregations through our local networks to get to know one another, get to know the other congregations in their local area, and to work together on the kind of projects that are going on in their churches and projects within their local towns. We also encourage our congregations to link with other similar congregations or congregations that are working on similar projects right across the length and breadth of Scotland. And some of the church members themselves will become award assessors or volunteers, or may even go on to become trustees of our charity. So our remit is quite wide, and we just do our best to support our congregations through their environment journey.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Judith. It's great to hear what so much is going on. And of course, with Glasgow hosting the COP talks this year, Eco Congregation Scotland were very central to everything that was going on around Climate Sunday and around all the issues that were happening there over the COP26 talks. So a big thank you, I think, to everybody in Eco Congregation Scotland for a really busy year that you've really had. So thanks to all of you for that. Finally, we wanted to hear a little bit about what denominations on a wider scale we're doing. And in that regard, we're delighted to have with us Jo Chamberlain, the Environmental Officer of the Church of England. She's going to talk a bit about the push to net zero within the Church of England itself and what the denomination is doing.
Thanks, Andrew. Am I coming through? I'm going to share my screen so you don't have to look at me, maybe switch it up a little bit. Oh, no, disabled screen sharing. Don't worry, we'll skip that. So I'm going to talk about reaching net zero carbon. And this isn't something that's separate from the the schemes that we've talked about, because they are really foundational for churches to get on board with this. Without them, I don't think we'd be anywhere near trying to reach net zero carbon. But actually trying to cut your carbon emissions, I think, is really important for churches to get on with, because my feeling is that we can't speak with any credibility or authenticity unless we're getting our own house in order and bringing down our emissions. It's key to our creation care, and it's part of our act of solidarity with people who are already suffering from the impact of climate change. So reducing our emissions and bringing them down as close to zero as we possibly can, and then doing what we can to mitigate the rest, is where we're headed. So the Church of England made this commitment in February 2020 at General Synod. So the Synod made the decision, and that spoke to the whole of the rest of the church to try and work out how we're going to get to net zero by 2030. So we've spent some time in the middle. So I work for the national church. We've been thinking about, what does that actually mean? What do we actually have to work on? And we're focusing on our energy use. So that's in our buildings. So heating, lighting, and the other energy use in your buildings. And then the energy that we use in our cars for work-related travel. We've done some audits to see where we use the most energy, and I'm sure it won't be any surprise to you to learn that the biggest proportion of our energy is in our heating. Lighting is quite small, and then there's about a quarter is classed as other. And then we use some more audits to say, well, what can we do about it? How can we reduce our emissions? And these audits showed us which kind of solutions were coming up regularly in the different churches. And from that, we've produced a document called The Practical Path to Net Zero, which shows you various steps that you can take in your church to cut your emissions. And I haven't been able to share my screen now, but I will put some links in the chat when I finish talking, and you'll be able to find it. And although it's been written by the Church of England and uses Church of England terminology, the ideas in it are applicable across whichever denomination you belong to. So I hope you find it a useful tool. You can, I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. So that's what we did in the middle. What can you do in your churches? So like the Synod made this commitment, I think the first thing to do is to make a commitment as a church, because it's a big deal. It's a big commitment to try to actually reduce your carbon emissions to zero, or as near to zero as you possibly can get. And you're going to need as much support as you can. So the days of a little group beavering away in the corner are gone. You need to get the leadership team on board, the minister, your church council, whatever that means. And you need to get the congregation on board as well, so that everybody is part of this decision-making process, because there will be implications for your church. And that's where the eco-church, eco-congregation schemes are brilliant, because if you're already working on those, you've got that groundswell of support within your congregation and from your minister. So that's really, really helpful. So maybe the first step is to pass your own motion, your own commitment to reach net zero emissions. Then you need to work out what emissions are. What emissions have you got? If you're a Church of England church, then there's an energy footprint tool that has been developed, which means that when you log on to do your annual returns that Church of England churches have to do, there's a place where you can type in your energy bill, information from your energy bill, and it will tell you your carbon footprint. So if you're here listening and you're in a Church of England church, please, please, please fill in your energy footprint tool. But if you're not a Church of England church, or if you're thinking, well, we did that, we want to do more, then I would say look at the 360 carbon tool that's been developed by Climate Stewards, and it's delighting that Caroline from Climate Stewards is here today. And that will help you to calculate your carbon footprint, but it will give you a bigger picture. It'll look at more things and help you to go deeper. So measure either the energy footprint tool or the 360 tool from Climate Stewards. Then, when you've got all that background work done, you need to start working on reducing your emissions. So start with the practical path to net zero. And you can use it as a checklist, or you can print it off, or you can take your device into church and work through it online. And it will help you see what you've already done, so you can feel great, which is good. It will help you to think what you can do easily, straight away. And it will help you to think about where you need to go next. What are the big jobs that you're going to need to do? Where will you need to get advice, where you need to raise money, where you need to plan ahead. And what we've learned from these tools is there are some quick wins, and some of these have already been mentioned today. So the first quick win for everyone is switch to a green energy tariff. Everyone can do that. It's not particularly easy right at this moment, but hopefully the energy market will settle down and we can start switching again to find a green energy tariff. The second quick win is to switch your lights to LED lights. It's surprising how many churches still haven't done that. The next thing is really not what you'd expect me to say, but it's basic maintenance. It's looking after your gutters. It's fixing the broken windows. These things feel mundane, but they're really important if we're going to reduce the amount of energy that we need to use. And in a way, those are things you can think, well, we do that already. That's already part of the plan. So that's a big pat on the back. Well done. Excellent. And then the other quick win is take control of your controls. Don't have the heating on when you don't need it, or the lights on when you don't need it. Can you zone your heating so that you only heat a small part of the building? I think it was Fiona who was saying in the winter they use a small building which has got a much more efficient heating system, and they don't heat the whole building of the main chapel. It's that kind of thing. So take control of your controls and make sure you only use the energy when you need it. And we've got some more ideas on our website, so I'll put that into the chat. And then the last thing I would say that churches can do is plan, because, as I said at the beginning of this talk, the biggest challenge is heating. How do we get our churches away from burning fossil fuels to keep them warm, especially those big drafty barns that sit on tops of hills with an enormous space? How on earth do we do that? So that is going to take a lot of thinking and planning, and there are answers and there are solutions, but you need to investigate them and plan them. When is your boiler going to come to the end of its life? Get your research done now, get an options appraisal, get someone in to give you some advice, and get someone to help you start looking at how you're going to raise the money. Let me tell you what happened to us in our house. I'm married to someone who's ordained, so we live in a church-owned house, and on the weekend of Storm Arwen, our heating packed up. And I live in Sheffield, and Storm Arwen dumped about half a foot of snow in Sheffield. It was freezing, and it's an emergency. What was the solution? It's a new boiler. We now have a brand new spanky gas boiler, which is lovely and warm, but we're now committed to fossil fuels for the next 15 years. So that's why you need to plan, so you don't end up making a quick decision because you've got no other choice and you're still tied to your gas boiler for the next 20 years. So those are the main things that I want you to do. And then the other thing to say from the Church of England point of view is what we're trying to do now is work out how we help the whole church get to net zero, not just our churches, but our church schools and our clergy houses and our cathedrals and our offices. So we are trying to make a timeline of all the things that we need to do between now and 2030 to make sure we get to net zero. So we are consulting on that. We've written a draft, we're consulting on it. So all members of the Church of England have been asked to give us their feedback, but we would love other people who are interested, who could contribute to learn from your experience as well. So I will share information about that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks a million, Jo. That's a fantastic overview of everything that's been going on. It's really great to hear such a tremendous commitment and such work that's gone into it. So we really appreciate that. Just to sum up then, I mentioned earlier the 3 greening schemes, but I also want to add a fourth. For those of you in the Catholic Church in England and Wales, the Live Simply scheme, very much on the lines of EcoChurch, cafod.co.uk is where you'll see all about the Live Simply scheme. If you're in Ireland, the Catholic Church is part of Eco Congregation Ireland. Not quite sure what the situation in Scotland, Judith, but I'd say if you're in the Catholic Church in England and Wales, it's the Live Simply scheme. So any of those 4 schemes are really, would be delighted to hear from you, and we really look forward to more churches getting involved in any of those schemes, no matter where you are in the country. So a big thank you to all those panelists tonight and all who've spoken. We're a bit over time, but I'll hand you back to Andy.
Andrew, thank you very much. Some absolutely fascinating stuff there. So we are a little bit over time, but there's some really rich stuff. Now, as long as the people involved in the technology tell me I can do this, what I'm suggesting is that we carry on for till about 8:10. As long as it's not going to cut off on us, let's aim for that. So Mike, if I can just get a thumbs up on that idea, but if you have to go, if you've promised to be in the kitchen cooking by 8 o'clock, so be it. We're sorry we're a bit over, but that's what we'll plan to do, to give space for this next also very important session. So can I now hand over to Hannah Brown? Hannah Brown has also been on the steering committee and is from the joint public issues team, the Methodist, the Baptist, the Church of Scotland. I'm probably missing somebody, but those denominations work together on these issues, and Hannah works with them. Hannah, can you take us into that whole area of speaking up, of campaigning? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the United Reformed Church is our last partner in the Joint Public Issues team. So yeah, we wanted to chat a little bit now about the Speak Up section of Climate Sunday. So that's the work of joining up all of the things we've been talking about so far, all the things we're doing in our communities, all the things we're doing in our households, with those things that we're calling on the government, on world leaders to do, to enable us all to move towards responding to the climate crisis properly. And for many churches, Climate Sunday was their first chance to do this speaking up about climate change. Together we connected that calling we felt through our faith with the need to hold our world leaders and our leaders here in the UK to account in responding to the climate crisis. But as many of us found, COP26, the kind of key moment we were working towards, offered a bit of a mixed bag when it came to policy progress. For the first time, we saw language about restricting the use of fossil fuels in the agreements made at COP. And to much celebration of campaigners within this network, we saw financial compensation for loss and damage boosted up the agenda at COP. But the commitments in both of these areas and in other areas as well didn't go far enough. The hope of keeping the commitments to limit global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels is still at risk. More work is needed to ensure that those commitments are ambitious and that targets are met on a global scale as well as here in the UK. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time asking what next. As churches who've either just begun or are continuing on a journey with speaking up to call for change for the climate, what should we be asking of our leaders to ensure that we do take the right action to keep that hope of 1.5 alive? So we've invited 3 speakers from Climate Sunday's partner organisations to tell us a little bit about what they see the priorities are here. We've asked each of them to respond to that question. What do they think is the most important thing that we need to be asking for from our world leaders in order to keep the hope of 1.5 alive? We'll be hearing from Cameron first, who works as part of Operation Noah, which is a Christian charity working within the church to inspire action on the climate crisis. He'll then be followed by Billy, who represents Tear Fund, who work with local churches and organisations in more than 50 countries to respond to the complex challenges of poverty. And finally, we'll hear from Jen, who's part of the Young Christian Climate Network, who organised one of the biggest coordinated Christian responses to COP26, which was the relay to COP26 from Cornwall to Glasgow. So we'll kick off with handing over to Cameron to tell us his response.
Great, thank you, Hannah. My name is Cameron, as Hannah said. I'm a trustee with Operation Noah, and thank you for having me here this evening. At Operation Noah, we work with the church to inspire action on climate. And one of our major campaigns these last several years has been our Bright Now campaign. And our Bright Now campaign encourages churches to divest or disinvest from fossil fuels, take money out of fossil fuels, and invest it directly in climate solutions such as renewable energy. We invite you to join us in this work because fossil fuels, by which I mean oil, gas, and coal, literally fuel the climate crisis, as burning fossil fuels warms the planet. In fact, the International Energy Agency says we must stop all new fossil fuel developments right now, all new ones, if we hope to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The International Energy Agency also says we have enough coal, oil, and gas at this very moment from existing developments to see us through the renewable energy transition. But the problem is that major fossil fuel companies plan to exploit new reserves and increase production at the very moment we need to drastically decrease the amount of fossil fuels we're burning. So, while some fossil fuel companies had big ambitions, and you've probably seen them advertise net zero commitments maybe for 2050, the problem is we have to effectively cut greenhouse gas emissions in half by the end of the decade. So in other words, 2040 or 2050 are too late. Or as Bill McKibben, one of our heroes at Operation Noah, who's the founder of the global divestment movement, Bill McKibben has said, when it comes to climate, winning slowly is losing. So that's something to really, really hold on to. Now, the good news is that most of the big UK denominations, the big UK churches, have already divested. They've already taken their money out of fossil fuels and acknowledged it's no longer ethical or even financially prudent to invest in these companies that are not working in good faith and are in fact causing actual harm to people and to the planet that God loves. So the good news is, though, that even the two biggest churches that do still have investments in fossil fuels, major investments, such as the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church of England and Wales, they're seeing more and more individual dioceses divesting. We're seeing more and more grassroots campaigners, both connected to Operation Noah and not connected to Operation Noah, demanding change as these churches continue to hold on to some investments at the national level. Many of these churches at the diocesan level are saying, no thanks. So that's really, really good news. Why do we divest, Cameron, you might say? And this is the last thing I'll end with, is by divesting, we take away, especially as churches, we take away the moral cover that we provide for these companies. We're trying to say that it's no longer okay to behave in this way, now that we know what fossil fuels are doing, and now that we know what these companies are planning to do, but we know we can't afford to do it. If you'd like to get involved in this work, please go to our website, operationnoah.org, or please contact me directly at communications, plural, communications @operationnoah.org, and I'd love to talk to you more. Thank you.
Hi there, I think I'm going next. I'm Billy from Tier Fund. So to keep 1.5 alive, we need to keep the political pressure on. And to do that, we've got to show that climate action is supported by a massive movement of ordinary people, that it's a vote winner, especially in the Tory constituencies where the MP is not convinced about net zero. So whatever you think of Boris Johnson, he's still seen as more engaged on climate change than any of his Tory leadership rivals, which is something of a worry given the current situation. So whoever follows him may actually end up being less engaged than he is. And so in the meantime, we will need MPs telling them that they are getting pressure from their constituents about the climate crisis. Now, of course, the church is really, really well placed to do this. We're often seen as conservative with a small c. And so MPs, particularly Tories, are more likely to listen if a group from the local church contacts them than if the local environmental action group does. So at Tier Fund, our one key ask to keep 1.5 alive is actually to you guys, the church. The key ask is this: engage your MP on climate change. It's absolutely vital that we do that now. Now, Tier Fund and all these other organisations on the call have plenty of resources to help you do that. The Climate Emergency Toolkit is one of them. It's a collaboration between lots of the organisations on this call, and it supports churches to take action across the whole range of the Climate Sunday areas, but with speaking up being a really critical component. Churches make a formal climate emergency declaration or recognition statement, and that gives them a brilliant opportunity to engage their MP, local councillors as well, and other people from their community. You could invite your MP to a service where you're making that declaration, for example. So far, 76 churches have declared a climate emergency, and some of these have reported really good engagement with their MP and local council. You'll be able to see who's declared on the map on the website, and I'll put the link in the chat when I finish speaking. The more churches who declare a climate emergency, the more we're going to build that ordinary citizens' climate movement, and the more we'll make it impossible for the government to ignore us. So I wonder whether your church could be one of those in 2022. The toolkit's currently being refreshed. There's going to be a new version available in February. If you sign up now, you'll get the updated version when it comes up out later. So I will put those links in the chat in a minute. We're also, of course, encouraging individuals to be in contact with their MP. An easy way to do this would be the Climate Coalition's Green Heart campaign that's coming up in February. It's a brilliantly simple campaign if you've not done it before. It's really memorable for MPs because they get a green heart in the post around Valentine's Day and a letter from constituents underlining why they care about climate change and asking what we want the government to do. And that includes things like the stuff on fossil fuels and climate finance. There are plenty of good policy asks on the Climate Coalition website to help you write your letter. And you don't have to craft a really complicated green heart, just a paper one will do. But I do encourage you to do that. So our one ask really to keep 1.5 alive is churches, Christians, we need to keep the pressure on the government to make it clear that this is urgent. It's a climate emergency, and we need grassroots MPs to be being told that all the time so that when the leadership changes in the Tory party, there will be pressure on them. So yeah, please take action and please do engage your MPs this year. And I'm going to pass over to Jen from YCCN.
Amazing, thanks Billy. Yeah, I'm going to echo quite a lot of things that Cameron and Billy have said, but in keeping 1.5 alive, I've got a whole shopping list of things that I would really like to happen, but I'll focus on what we need the UK government, our government, to be doing and where we fit into that, given that I'm going to assume that most of us here are not in government. So the things that we really need the UK to do are to build trust and to act first. So a major part of the fight for particularly climate justice in terms of more climate vulnerable countries is that they simply can't trust the richer nations who for years and years have been promising to come through on climate finance, on loss and damage, on mitigation and adaptation. Words and words have been said, promises have been made, and we have not followed through. And without that trust, developing nations have no confidence to adapt. They have no resources to do so either, but they also just cannot make those steps if they don't trust that the richer nations are behind them. And given that the US and Europe are responsible for 50% of all the carbon that's ever been emitted, and yet we still can't keep the weakest of our promises, we're never going to be able to balance those scales if we're not coming through on those promises and building up that trust with the rest of the world. So making those reparations and building that trust is super important for the future. Justice is sort of retrospective, but we need to build that trust to move forward. And I think part of that would be the next thing is that we need our government to act first. Taking leadership in a climate crisis can often mean a sort of vulnerability. It means taking the first steps to decarbonize and cut off your fossil fuels, say we're not going to allow any more licenses, stop digging, even when you're not sure that other nations will follow. And even if, as is often argued far too much in the UK, we think we're not the worst. And for an example, that the only national government that has so far committed to providing money for climate loss and damage is Scotland. And Scotland is a tiny government with a pretty small budget. It's not a lot of money, and yet they're the only ones that have had the courage to admit fault and at least make a very small start to put things right. And they have no confidence. I'm sure that the US, England, that other governments will follow, but it's still important that they take that step. And so at every level, be it in churches or local government or UK government, we need action from leadership that is humble and vulnerable, but that makes those first steps and encourages others to follow. And lots of people argue the UK is now a smaller emitter than the US or China or other developing nations, but we have a huge historical carbon debt, and at the minute we are very much berating other nations for the speck in their own eye and conveniently avoiding our own plank, and that's really not good enough. So as a church community, we're very well practiced at taking leaps of faith, so I think we're in a good place to encourage our leaders to do the same. But how do we go about doing that? I think the thing that really comes down to what we can do and where we fit in. a really core part of it is about building community. So YCCN, the Young Christian Climate Network, was set up knowing that action comes out of community and then community sustains action. And that's really important. It's a really key part of speaking up and making our voices heard is strength in numbers, effectively, is having community that sustains action, that sustains all of this, because it's exhausting. It's going to go on for a long time. I don't think the government's going to turn around and agree to turn off fossil fuels tomorrow, unfortunately. And because it can be scary and overwhelming if we do it on our own. But we have a huge strength in the church that we already have this massive community. And that's incredibly powerful. We just have to use it for what we're speaking out for. So I would really encourage you to make use of that community, to talk about the climate crisis as much as you can in church, in that community that you already have, to bring those voices together and to change the way in which we talk about it. Because as Billy said, this is an emergency, it is a crisis, and the words that we use matter, the way we talk about it, it matters. It's about human justice, human lives, and bringing that all together. It's not in the abstract. So we're looking to build trust. We're looking to take humble action that goes first, even when we don't know what's going to follow. And the way to do that is through building community and bringing our voices together, because it's a whole lot less scary if we're speaking with one voice.
Thank you so much to all three of our speakers there, to Billy, to Cameron, and to Jen. I think what we would encourage you to go and do now is that there's been a couple of questions in the Q&A and in the chat to ask whether some of the resources that are being mentioned will be made available. We'll send out links following the webinar so that you can go and investigate some of these organisations more, go and find out where these resources are, but also to go back onto the Climate Sunday website, where a lot of this is already and will stay. And to really find your home for campaigning in the next steps. Go and find the people in the communities, just like Jen's been talking about, who feel like a place for you to keep going on this journey and to get really stuck in these next steps. There's so much out there, and so do head to the Climate Sunday website or have a look at the links that will be sent out after the webinar, and keep going on this journey. And I'll pass back to Andy now.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Billy, Jen, and Cameron, sorry. Fantastic. I'm just going to wrap up now by sharing some thoughts that came from the Environmental Issues Network, we call it EIN, of Churches Together in Britain and Ireland, which is in fact the mothership for Climate Sunday. Climate Sunday has been put on by members of EIN, and EIN is where the environmental leads, if you want to call it that, for all the major denominations and for the Christian charities that are working on the environment. We regularly coordinate about once a quarter. The attendance goes up and down depending on kind of what's going on and so on. But that is what has given rise to this. And we met on Tuesday and we asked the question, if churches ask us, what are the key themes to work on in 2022, given that the UK still has the presidency of COP until the next COP, which is actually going to be in Egypt in November of this year. So the UK remains legally and politically responsible for taking forward the commitments, strong or weak, that were made at COP26. What can we best focus our attention on? Whatever the campaign, and we've heard about lots of different campaigns here, which is fantastic, but whatever the campaign, what themes can we most usefully work on? And there was a very clear answer, and we would recommend 2 external themes and 1 thing we need to think about for ourselves. And those 2 external themes are no more fossil fuel development in the UK. It is inconceivable, scientifically and politically, that Britain thinks it can make a serious difference to the commitments that were made at COP26 if the leader of COP26 continues to develop fossil fuel in the UK. It is beyond ridiculous. It's utterly irresponsible. It is promoting catastrophe. It needs to stop. And we need to say that through whatever campaign we get a chance to say it in. So if you are meeting your MP, if you are telling your MP about the next Climate Sunday you're going to hold, make sure you tell them that too, and participate any way you can in getting that message across to government. The second thing is about loss and damage. I think Jen was mentioning that. The fact that there is no way now that many countries, particularly low-lying countries, countries in the poorer parts of the world, can actually adapt to much of the impact of climate change they are experiencing. There is simply nothing anybody except the fish can do about sea levels rising over their heads. So in Bangladesh, in so many other parts of the world, there will be millions of people moving. You cannot adapt to sea level rise. It's way beyond adaptation now. So we desperately need a financial mechanism to help those countries respond to the loss and damage that they have suffered. They are suffering. They are going to suffer, whether we like it or not now, because climate change is already so far advanced. We need the UK government, why it is the president of COP, to take proactive action to set up such a mechanism. At the moment, it's simply not. That's the fact. In fact, Alok Sharma, the president of COP, has said Britain will not do that. So in what way do we think we have the moral authority to tell other countries to raise their aid to help defend poorer countries from climate change? It's ridiculous. So that's the second message. We have got to take a lead on loss and damage. And the third thing is a matter of Christian integrity, I think. And there are many different ways of describing what I'm about to say, and we can debate the words. But I think what came out of the EIN meeting was this very clear sense that we need what Pope Francis has called an ecological conversion. We Christians need to lead the way in completely changing our relationship with the rest of creation and thinking through what that means for what we eat, what we buy, what we say, what we drive, everything. Actually, that can be utterly liberating because we are part of God's creation. What if we understood better our role within it? That can only be a beautiful thing, as well as absolutely fundamental to saving the planet. And if we can do that, we are then in a position to play a prophetic role with the rest of society to turn what is currently a terrible, terrible risk, which is coming true. It's not just in the future, we all know this, into an opportunity for a completely different way of living that would surely be better for us and everybody else in the future. So that's whatever words we want to use, that challenge to ourselves, okay? Now, people have been asking throughout this, what about this, what about that, where do I find the resources and so on? Just to reiterate that the Climate Sunday website remains open. Thank you very much to CTBI, Mike McCure, who's behind the scenes here. You won't see his face, but he's the one doing all the technology. He and his team will be looking after the website. And there's all the resources we've already created, but there's one really critical new resource that has just gone up. And it's this: we asked every supporter organization, every participant in Climate Sunday, the 31 charities and denominations, to say one thing, one resource, one event, one campaign, one something that they would offer for the year ahead, very much focused on the year ahead, this critical year ahead. So that, and so we have a document up on the website now, as of today, I believe, thanks to Mike and his team, which has from those organizations, the one thing they would offer. So many of the campaigns that you've been hearing about from Cameron, from Billy, from Jen and others are listed there, right up to date, okay? So please do look for that to give you clues on and pick your chosen one. As Hannah said, find your campaigning home. There's lots of brilliant campaigns out there. Many of them will be working away at the same sorts of issues, but from different directions. They're all necessary. Find the one that really works for you. And feel at home in it, get stuck in, would be our strong advice as Christians who have been working on this, some of us longer than others. I look at Hannah and others on this call and think, oh, I've been doing this a very long time. It's great to see a new generation coming through. We need that. So please find your home and grow in campaigning at this absolutely critical time. Thank you all for coming. And thank you for the team for putting this on. Before we go, I want to recognize that we are absolutely not alone in this. This is God's planet. We are doing what we do out of love of creation and of love of the Creator. And we desperately need God in this battle to sustain us and so on. And we need to be listening to him, discerning together how we keep going. So we have asked a very old friend of the Christian environmental movement. In fact, the so-called friend, sorry, not so-called, definite friend, but tells me that we actually met when we both went to the open day for the university that we were planning to go to. Isn't that incredible? A very old friend, Reverend Margot Hodson, who is a theologian, is also a parish priest in Oxford, has written a lot, writes a lot, and is theological director of the John Ray Institute, also a member of this campaign. I'd just like to invite Margot to send us off with a commissioning prayer, all of us, to take a brief break and then get back on with the work in our churches, in our communities, of addressing climate change as part of normal Christian mission. Margot, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Andy. Well, as we come to the end of this webinar, I think we can trust that God has led us thus far and he will lead us forward. So let's pray. Lord, we thank you for this amazing earth that you have given us. Thank you for the life of the earth, for creatures of the land, sea and sky, for plants in abundance, for rivers and seas, mountains and valleys, for the earth in all its brilliance of colour, noise and diversity. Thank you that you've given us responsibility to care for this earth. And thank you for the fruits of the earth in many forms that we enjoy. But Lord, we grieve the loss of so much of the earth's abundance through our misuse of creation. And we grieve the damage of the earth's climate through our overuse of fossil fuels and of other ways. At the start of this year, we ask for your strength to persevere and continue the work of Climate Sunday. We thank you for all that has been achieved through the hard work of many people and through discerning your spirit leading us forward. As the UK continues to have leadership through its presidency of the COP for responding to the climate crisis, may we continue to hold our leaders to account. As our churches look to rebuild from the pandemic, may we enthuse a vision to have a new care for God's creation in our congregations and in our wider communities. May our churches start to shine green with God's love for his world, and may we truly go forth as tenants of our King. Amen.
Amen. And what in all, it may seem abrupt, but we will shortly cut the whole thing and you can go and have your dinners. Thank you very much, Margot. Thank you all, everyone.